Hi everyone, I'm Lynn Cremando for YogaUOnline, and I'm here with Susi Hately. Susi is a yoga therapist, the author of multiple books and videos on subjects such as anatomy and kinesiology. She's managed in her work to seamlessly integrate her academic work in university training in the modern day sciences of kinesiology, exercise physiology, and biomechanics with ancient yogic healing practices. Since 2001, she's been on a mission to teach people how they can reduce or eradicate pain, and she's developed a tool called the Body-Mind Resource Model to support people in their own healing process. And she maintains that although pain is a fact of life, it does not have to run your life, and it does not really have to be your normal. Via her program called Functional Synergy, she's developed trainings in the application of therapeutic yoga, and she's delivered that to yoga teachers, yoga therapists, healthcare practitioners. She's also got her own IAYT, that's the International Association of Yoga Therapists, certified yoga therapist training, and her programs have been used and studied at the University of Calgary and by doctors, PTs, OTs, massage therapists, healthcare practitioners all over the world. So welcome, Susi.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So Susi, we're going to be talking about pain today. And I think it might be a great idea because you are kind of a subject matter expert on pain. If we just start with, it seems like recently there's been just a kind of an explosion of research and new information about pain, about neuroplasticity, about the neurobiology of pain, how, pain is a physical phenomenon, but really more of a nervous system phenomenon. Can you just talk first about pain?
The way that I like to look at pain, that I find effective in the sense of helping my clients get out of pain, is that pain is I like to think of pain as a signal that's letting us know that something's off track. And that it's a very normal physiological experience, and oftentimes there's just things that are in the way of experiencing life that's not painful. And so I like to say, when I've yet to meet somebody who is experiencing pain, who also moves well. And so when I am looking at someone's movement patterns, how they move and how they load through their body, then their experience of pain often changes. There's some really neat research that comes through Lorimer Moseley and the group down in Australia, which talks about how feeling safe is really vital for how one experiences pain. And that if you're feeling threatened, that your experience of pain will go up. And so what I love about that is, for a long time, I've taught that you've got to feel, you got to have a sense of control inside and know that you can change your experience of pain. And that to me is another take on feeling safe, right? So when you have an internal locus of control, or a more developed locus of control, knowing that you have the ability to shift, that's inherently a safer place to be. So when we feel a little more helpless, then that doesn't feel so safe. And so then it makes sense then that your pain levels will be up in that situation. So when people feel less helpless, when they feel more in control and they can do something to make a shift happen, then their experience changes quite a bit. And then that opens the door to having a longer experience without pain.
That's so interesting. I had a question that I was going to ask you later on, because I have a lot of clients as a yoga therapist myself with chronic pain conditions. And I do notice that sometimes the physical pain is one thing and it has its own life, but the side issues like anger, grief, and especially with chronic pain where you're neither going to die of that condition nor ever be free of pain. Mm-hmm. that sense of loss, but also the connection between that and fatality or life, life and death issues, even though you're not in a life or death, it's going to raise that. I think you're talking about that safety issue.
What's interesting about pain is there is one time that I can think of, and I'm sure there's others, but there's one that everyone will go, yeah, I get that. Where there's one time in our lives where there can be an immense amount of pain, and yet the transcendence through that pain can be quite transformative. And that's during childbirth. And when I speak to midwives and doulas and OBGYNs who kind of get this path, they'll say that they see the goddess emerge, right? They see a real powerful spiritual transformation. And I think one reason that can happen is because the woman knows it's going to be over. And there's going to be something really awesome on the other end of it. Whereas when someone experiences pain that's not related to childbirth, we don't know when it's going to end. And so not knowing that makes it really tough, because you might have a really good day, but then you don't know when you're going to have your next really good day. And you might just assume you're going to have a really bad day the next day. So you might as well get everything done in the good day because you just don't know what's going to happen. So what I found really important is to teach people that, like when I'm in session with them, to teach them that how they can start to gain what I've been calling control over their symptoms and sensations. Because when we can give the nervous system, which is something you referred to earlier, a different signal or a different experience, then it's going to respond in kind. And what I've noticed is when people who have pain, like persistent, consistent, relentless pain, then when we keep pushing through that pain, or the pain levels go up, then that keeps sending, what I like to say is that keeps sending the signal of this is what is normal. And so then what I like to say is then the nervous system gives it back to us in kind. And so the way to make a shift of that is, can somebody learn to move in a way that doesn't increase the pain? I'm not saying move in a pain-free range of motion. I used to say that, but now what I say is, can you move in a range that doesn't increase the pain? And so if you can start to play in that sort of pathway, in that roadway, in that lane, mm-hmm. then the nervous system gets a new stimulus, and it's as if then it's like, oh, there's a new normal here, and then that opens the door to something new. And so you're probably getting the sense both from the bio and also from how I'm talking is that I enter into this conversation from the body, mostly because it's my training. But over the course of time, I've seen that the body is a very grounded thing to come back to. Like it moves or it doesn't move. It braces or it doesn't brace it. It holds or it doesn't hold. Like we can very objectively see what's going on with it. What's tricky is our mind or our mental state or emotional state, which can be a little bit more fluid and dynamic and harder to, it's going to sound not quite accurate, but it's harder to pin down, right? It's harder to be more objective about those. Mm-hmm. Whereas, so when someone gets the experience of how their body's moving, they can get a very truthful experience of what's happening. And that objective measure is something that they can measure against and be able to see how they're progressing. And that also then gives them a greater sense of control, like they've got this, they can actually do this. Yeah. And they also can see the results of it and say, okay, yeah, I can actually do this, which then raises that idea of confidence that they can do it, and then control, and then that feeling of being safe.
Awesome. I have used the analogy that if you had a box and this is the tolerable level.
Yeah.
And the pain is spiking, that for some people, if you could get the spikes to end at the tolerable level,
yeah,
that's a progress. So for people who are not ever going to be better, you have some people, as a therapist, when you're working with people where this is the best day they're ever going to have. Today is the best day they're ever going to have. So I think that those tools that you use to empower them are really something really important. Mm-hmm. You have straddled the worlds of traditional medicine and ancient medicine, and you've been, I want to say this way, on the underground. You've been on the inside.
Yeah.
And it seems like over the past, say, 10 to 15 years, yoga has moved from the shadows into being taking a reasonable seat at the pain management table. Mm-hmm. How have you seen that evolution, and why do you think it's happened?
That's a really great question. I remember before I became a yoga teacher, but I was very interested in yoga and I was practicing. And I was also working in a pain clinic as a kinesiologist. And I remember reading an article in a alternative magazine, one of those free magazines, about a woman who was recovering from cancer, and she utilized meditation and yoga. And her physician said, well, it's not going to harm you, but it's not really going to help you either. Exactly. But it's not going to harm you. So go for it. Right. And I still remember reading that. It stuck with me for some reason. Right. And I remember thinking, that's like, is it all in her head that it's making her feel better? Like, really? Is it all in her head? And that's when I was starting to kind of question these things, right? Because I came from the science background, but I'm like, but this yoga thing works. But is it like, right? And so then, and I think we've moved from this place of kind of not believing it could be this good to, yeah, it is actually this good. And there's research to show that it's this good.
Yeah.
And I also think that along with that, like I remember when I had one of my programs stay at the University of Calgary, and we were doing a presentation for a number of physicians at a hospital. Mm-hmm. And they were saying to me, so what kind of yoga is this? And so I just did my best. I said, so do you practice yoga? And they're like, no. Well, what kind of yoga is it? I'm like, oh God. Right. But the thing is that they were getting interested in it. Right. And so I think there's been enough people, there's enough research to tell the story, that the story is accurate. And I think there's just enough people who've had great experiences in the practice of yoga related to pain, that that there's just a wave of change that's happening, and important people that have impact, and I use the word important loosely. It's like they have an impact, they have an impact for change they're in high levels of business, and they're in their high levels of government, and they've experienced the benefits, right? And so then that sort of that I think has just kind of led. I remember the first physician referral I got, and she just kept referring people because her patients were getting better. And so I think there's just the story was able to be proven to a point, but also there were enough people that were like, this is innately we knew. So I think that there's just been this wave from like the back and forth I kind of laughed about earlier, of like, really, mm-hmm. really, huh, really, to mm-hmm. yeah, this actually there's enough runway, enough people that have had benefit from it.
Yeah. So have you seen a shift in the yoga approach to pain? Because I feel like there was in the beginning, all these movement things that are asana based, when in fact movement, is a little more nourishing than poses. But then we've brought in all of these other practices, more esoteric practices that I think are more sometimes empowering as well. So how do you said the on-ramp was movement. How do you, when you're looking at a person, You know, in yoga, we don't look at conditions, we look at a person.
Yeah.
How do you move in for that?
So I think one distinction is that for me, there's been a real misrepresentation of posture and asana in yoga. And I remember reading, I think it was the Hatha Yoga Pradikapa, or maybe in sutras, I can't remember. And I remember reading a line around sitting comfortably and still is what asana is. And it really jolted me awake. And this was back in the early 2000s. And I thought, well, wait a second, where did the translation posture ever come from? And so I started to teach from this place of sitting comfortably and still. And then can we do all of our movements and all of our activities from a place of sitting comfortably and still? So when you're out running, when you're out playing hockey, when you're out skiing, can you be sitting comfortably and still? And that transformed the way I taught and I really understood. So to me, asana is a state of being that's very dynamic. Mm-hmm. So I think where things went a little hooey in the general practice of yoga is this idea of a static thing called posture. And that can be really troubling, right, for people. And so when we come at it from a state of being, then we as a teacher are in a state of being, which then we're then automatically seeing our person in a much more dynamic place than just a condition. And so when we can see state of being, then we see tissue change and we see general holding patterns, and we can see the personality and movement patterns. Like there's plenty of times where I've said to a client, you're a pretty hard driving, success driven person, aren't you? And they look at me like, well, what are you talking about? It's like, well, because that's how you move. Right. And so you can start to see the correlation between movement patterns and who they are and how that's contributing to their overall state of well-being and how they are with their pain. So I think that's probably a bit meatier in terms of this idea of the asana, the piece of it, because we need to, if we're going to be working with the whole person, then the technique and tools that we utilize from the practices of yoga, whether it's breathing, movement, stillness, those take in the overall concept of asana, of that presence and that awareness, which is the foundation for being able to meet someone where they're not just a condition and that they are this full breathing human being that happens to be holding their body in a certain way as a result of something that they're experiencing that is contributing to symptoms.
So in the when you work with someone who's had long-term pain, mm-hmm. and you're starting to work with them, I know it's to me it's really a matter of as we kind of said, autonomic dysregulation moving toward regulation. How do you kind of walk somebody through? It's not a switch that you flip. It's a very subtle sometimes process. How do you manage the nuance and get them to kind of, I think of it as sort of almost dancing with their pain rather than rejecting the pain or thinking it's going to be gone, but really doing this little dance to move toward a more embodied life, really.
The start of it is, for me, is helping them learn how to feel, and just to feel how their body moves and what parts of their body are moving and what parts of their body are gripping or what parts of their body are breathing or what parts of their body are doing whatever and what they're feeling. And in some cases, some people can't feel at all.
Yeah.
And so then what it becomes is, how would you describe the movement? And then that can provide the entree, because what I've noticed is we can't change anything we're not aware of. And so if we can't feel, then we won't be aware. And so then if we're not aware, then we don't know what we really need to change to support. So it's this sort of this process of being able to feel and to become aware. Mm-hmm. And then through that process, the change just sort of happens. Now, there does need to be a compelling reason to change. There needs to be, like, if I'm talking to a client and I'm asking them and to have them describe what's going on through their body, and then I ask them, so if this was resolved, what would be possible? And then they tell me what could be possible. And so then that could very well be either the compelling reason or very close to the compelling reason, because we can help someone reduce pain pretty quickly. But to maintain that process is, as you put it, living an embodied life, we need to somehow seduce ourselves back to the mat. And so what seduces us back is the compelling reason for change. Because we might not like the pain that we're in, but sometimes we've all experienced the different phases of our life, that sometimes the devil we know is better than the devil we don't know. And will it be successful, and will it be worth the effort? And so there needs to be that compelling reason that helps us stay on the path of progress.
So you're really creating like a radiant vision of what's in it for you to go through what could be a painful process, or sometimes I think people get attached to their pain, or they associate with their pain. And what you're doing really is that sort of cognitive reframing about, well, what if you went in a different direction? What if you had a different picture of who you are and how you're going to be today?
Yeah, maybe. That's interesting the way you put that. I haven't thought of it that way specifically. And that might be what I'm doing. I'd have to think more about it to say for sure. I think the nuanced part of it, though, is that I don't think I'm specifically trying to change the way they're thinking about it. However they're thinking about it is however they're thinking about it. And so my job is, in essence, to meet them where they're at. So the thing is that someone doesn't typically come to see me or many other therapists if they're not really interested in making a change. They might not be ready to make the full change, but there's something that they want to make a change. And so it may just be a reduction of pain. They might not believe that an eradication is available to them. And they might not even know that they don't believe it. But they're there for some reason or other. And so to me, I see my job as, maybe I don't get them to articulate it because they might not be able to fully articulate it. They just want to have something better. Mm-hmm. So I get to meet that whoever that person is and whatever they are. I get to meet that. And so then from there, I just work there. So maybe through the process, there's some cognitive shifting that's happening, but I don't typically go into trying to change their mindset. What I find is that the mindset changes when the results change. Do you personally spend a lot of time looking at, because you are kind of the scientist coming into the, how do you straddle those? Do you spend a lot of time looking at research, or do you just, so if I'm a typical yoga teacher and I don't have a degree in kinesiology, or if I'm a person who's got pain, I don't have a degree in kinesiology and biomechanics. What do I need to know besides your phone number to call you for therapy? This might sound really funny, actually. Like I've trained a lot of people in concepts of therapeutic yoga and utilizing biomechanics and kinesiology to help someone heal. And what's interesting is that a lot of people come into, like, the yoga teachers who don't have a lot of anatomy background will say, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. I don't have anatomy background. I don't have all this and this and this. And I'll say to them, this is what the pattern is. And the pattern is that the more anatomy that you have, sometimes the harder it is to understand. Because while we're working with anatomy, we're more working with movement patterns. And so we don't this is going to sound strange, but we don't actually have to know the muscle names in order to solve the problem. And so for the student who has pain, so someone who has pain and they don't have the biomechanics degree, they don't need to know that. Now, a lot of them want to know that. Like a lot of my clients want to know it because it helps them feel safer and helps them sort stuff out in their head. But they don't actually need it to get better. What they need to know is just to feel their body. And when they feel their body, then they can start to not need to push the symptoms away. Because I fundamentally don't believe that symptoms are bad. I think symptoms are letting us know there's something off track, perhaps. And so then we get to listen to the symptoms and not kind of squish them. Because just like my experience for myself and for my other clients is that if you squish them away, they just come back another way, a lot louder and a little,
yes, they do,
a little more like monstrous. And so if we can catch them at a whisper level, then and sometimes we miss them at the whisper level and they do come back a little louder, but when we can catch them at a whisper level, then we can resolve them a little bit quicker. Now, when someone's got persistent pain, we're not quite at a whisper level anymore. But we can still dampen it down in an effective way so that then it's not quite as loud.
Yeah. So you have a course coming up for YogaUOnline, and it's on yoga for chronic pain.
Yeah.
Yogic keys to relieve, manage, and eliminate persistent pain issues.
Yeah.
Can you give us a hint?
Yeah.
What is one key?
Yes, no, for sure.
Give us a little hint.
Well, from my perspective, again, like what I think is a really effective way of helping someone get out of pain is to really pay attention to how we move and feel. So it's not what the movements, you'll see some of them are familiar, but how we do them will likely be unfamiliar, because there's a lot in traditional rehabilitation. It's just the nature of the industry is that there's not a lot of time taught how to actually do the exercise. And so people do them, but they don't necessarily do them well. And like I said earlier in our chat, that I've yet to meet someone who has pain who actually moves well. And so when I can help them move better and feel more, then they can connect more clearly to how their body functions. And then their pain starts to shift. So you'll discover ways of movement and you'll be able to explore that in your own body. And you might be surprised by what your movement patterns are or are not. And that a new awareness, which might be surprising, will open the door to more awareness and a greater possibility for changing up how you move and changing up how you feel.
Are you, do you marry, we haven't really talked about breath.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about the role that breath is going to play and how you can marry the breath and the movement to get a better result or to get any result?
Sure. No, breath is fundamental. And there's two ways to think, there's many ways to think about it, but here are two ways. One is that it's a great way of down regulating the system and relaxing the system. And so I use system because for me, it's more than just the nervous system. It really isn't like it's the entire system. And people will say, well, the nervous system governs the other systems, which is true. But I kind of like to think of it as our whole state of being. And so that can settle it all down and help us connect a bit more. And then the other piece of it is that breathing is so fundamental to our innate core stability, because when you look at some of the deeper and more internal aspects of core stability, there's the diaphragm at the top and the pelvic floor at the bottom, and the breathing and how the diaphragm and pelvic floor move is so fundamental to whether we can connect with or not to our core stability, or whether we brace or hold our breath or actually have an agile, responsive core. So like that from a physical standpoint is really vital. And then as someone continues to improve their ability to downregulate and their ability to connect to the physical aspects of breath, then they can start to connect to more subtle features of breathing and how it makes them feel. And it by becoming quieter and utilizing breath to help you just become overall quieter, then you can hear more clearly and you can catch sometimes those whispers I referred to earlier, and pay attention to those whispers, and you'll be able to intervene a lot sooner, because you can, like, people can, you do quick fixes and feel their pain reduced for maybe a short time, 2 hours, 3 hours a day or so, and then they'll feel they might just notice their pain coming back. And what I like to tell people is, when you start to feel those 2 hour, 3 hour, 1 day experiences of feeling better, that as that starts to fade, because it's a new pattern that their body is starting to embody, when that starts to fade, that good feeling, you'll likely start to notice some other things. And then that's when we can intervene and start to make a change. And you might feel some tightness, or you might feel some breath holding, or you might feel like jaw pulling or something. And so then we can intervene at that whisper level, because we start to realize when we're quieter, when those tight patterns come in, or other symptoms like that come in, they'll let us know that if we keep going along this path, we're going to actually have more pain. And so if we can intervene at that quieter, whispery level, then we'll improve our chances of not having pain down the road. So that breath, which is really a third point, can help us get to that quieter place. Once we've learned how to downregulate, once we've used it to help us become more responsive in our core, then it just naturally helps us become quieter, and we can listen more clearly to what our system is saying to us.
Is this some of this stuff you'll cover? Will you cover some down-regulating techniques in the course? That sounds awesome. This has been so fascinating, and it really makes me want to hear more, because it sounds like you got a whole bunch of stuff in there. You've spent a lot of time working on this topic in a very embodied way, which I think is so important. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you all back online soon. And for now, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Susie, so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.